Good afternoon. National Assembly for Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon is questions to the First Minister. Question 1 is withdrawn, so we move to question 2. Paul Davis.
Diolch Llywydd. A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am yr hyn y mae Llywodraeth Cymru yn ei wneud i gefnogi canol trefi yng Nghorllewin Cymru.
Wel, dylanwyd cyllid lleoedd llewyrchus llawn a ddewyd i Abertawe ac i gysylltiad Port Talbot. Roeddwyd cyllid i ddatblygu ardaloedd gwella busnes yn Llanelli ac yn Aberystwyth ac mae cronfa benthygiadau canol trefi yn cael ei datblygu hefyd.
Prif Weinidog, fel dwi'n siŵr y byddwch yn cytuno yma, marchnadoedd yn chwarae rhan bwysig yn economi canol ein trefi. Fe gwrddais i a cynrychiolwyr o farchnad Hwlffordd yn ddiweddar sydd ar hyn o bryd yn wynebu rhywfaint o ansicrwydd ynghylch dyfodol y farchnad, fod y farchnad yn darparu swyddi ar gyfer bron i 30 o bobl. Prif Weinidog, o dan yr amgylchiadau, a ydych chi'n cytuno â fi bod hi'n bwysig i ddiogelu ein marchnadoedd lleol, felly gallwch chi amlinellu pa gymorth mae Llywodraeth Cymru yn ei ddarparu i fasnachwyr marchnadoedd fel hyn?
Wel, wrth gwrs, bydd yr aelod yn gwybod am y datganiad gath i wneud dros y penwythnos ynglyn â trethu busnesau. Wy'n siŵr bydd yna lawer o busnesau yn elwa o'r datganiad hynny yn y dyfodol.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd. Dwi'n yn croesawu datganiad o wnaw di llun ynglyn â'r trethu busnes a'r arian ychwanegol i helpu busnesau o dan 50,000 o bunnoedd o werth. Mae hynny wrth gwrs ddim yn lle datblygu trethu busnes wedi datganoli yng Nghymru a trethu busnes system sydd yn mynd i wir angen i atebion Cymru. Ond yn y cyfamser, fedrwch chi esbonio Prif Weinidog sut mae'r hyn oedd eich Gweinidog wedi gyhoeddi di llun yn gallu helpu trefi fel Llanelli sydd wir yn dioddau nawr o peidio denu busnesau annibynnol i mewn i ganol y dre.
Amlwg bydd ddim yn rhywbeth sydd yn datrys pob problem. Problem Llanelli wrth gwrs yw'r ffaith bod siw gymaint o siopau tu fas i'r dre. Yn ywedig am harc trostre, a mae hwnna wedi bod yn broblem enghraifft ym Mhenabont, lle ddechreuodd hwn mwy na lai yn yr 80au. Ond fy marn i byddai'n rhwyddach i fusnesau i gael ei sefydlu yn y trefi, a ni wedi gweld wrth gwrs bod yna gynnydd wedi bod o fusnesau annibynnol bach yng Nghymru dros y flwyddyn diwetha, ac wrth gwrs bydd hwn yn rhywbeth bydd busnesau yn gallu defnyddio mwyn gweld yn ystyried sy'n mynd mewn i ganol Llanelli yn y dyfodol. Ond mae rhaid wrth gwrs i wneud mwy na hynny, a byddai'n bwysig dros ben bod yr awdurdod sir yn ystyried beth arall dylai gael ei wneud i ganol Llanelli mwyn sicrhau bod y llif mas o'r dre ddim yn parhau.
Question 3, Christine Chapman.
What actions is the Welsh Government taking to improve the role of women in the Welsh economy?
We are working with key organisations such as Chwarae Teg to increase the number of women accessing business support in Wales, and we are encouraging women to start up in business through the Business Startup Service.
Thank you. Well, I know that the Welsh Government has long maintained its commitment to using targeted infrastructure investment to deliver jobs and economic growth for Wales. Research carried out by Chwarae Teg suggests that women are significantly outweighed by men in the construction sector and take up less than 2% of apprenticeships, which they suggest has largely marginalised women from the employment benefits of infrastructure investment. First Minister, I would welcome your thoughts on this and on the possibility of making tackling this gender imbalance a central aspect of the procurement process.
I think there's certainly a great amount of weight in what the member says. I mean, looking at construction, for example, I know that the construction sector team is working with the Construction Industry Training Board to develop a funded programme entitled Construction Futures Wales. That programme will embrace the board's fairness, inclusion and respect agenda, and it is complementary to the Be Fair framework, which confirms an organisation's level of commitment in embracing the diversity of the workforce, their customers, and the culturally diverse environment in which they work. Officials are currently assessing tenders as part of the procurement process for the programme, and it is expected it will formally launch later this month. In addition, of course, equality is promoted through procurement through the application of the principles of the Wales Procurement Policy Statement.
William Graham.
And sadly report only 11% of local authorities in Wales providing adequate child care. Minister, would you lend your influence to trying to make sure that local authorities in Wales exceed this within 12 months? It clearly is a barrier to women progressing.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's a matter for local authorities, but we as a government have, of course, for example, through schemes such as Flying Start, been able to ensure that there are many families who are now able to access work and are able to acquire the parenting skills that they need. to enable them to move their families forward. And we have shown through Flying Start that through childcare and supporting families in a holistic way, that it is possible to make real differences in people's lives. Of course, as far as local authorities are concerned, they will need to assess their financial their position and make decisions according to what they can afford.
Jocelyn Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, recent reports clearly show the gender segregation of the Welsh workforce, with 4 out of 5 being in gender segregated jobs. So that's over 90% of skilled trade jobs are held by men, along, of course, with the higher wages that brings. How successful would you say you've been in attracting women into skilled work?
Well, I've mentioned the construction sector. I can say to the member that the Strategic Equality Plan contains an objective to address the causes of gender, ethnicity and disability pay and employment differences. But for example, the Welsh Industrial Development Advisory Board, the board that advises the Minister on large investment projects, is an exemplar within Welsh Government public appointments. The board is made up equally of 4 male and 4 female members, with the chair being female, although I accept that it will be a little time before we get to a position of true gender balance when it comes to certain of the trades that she has mentioned, given the fact that for many, many years they were traditionally seen as the province of men, and overcoming that in order to create better gender balance will take a little time.
Ellen Parrott.
First Minister, in addition to the construction industry, only 2% of apprenticeships in science-based subjects and technical subjects go to women. Will the Welsh Government consider piloting an ambassador programme to encourage young women to go into technical and science-based apprenticeships to show them that they can be the rule and rather than the exception?
Yes, we have an ambassador in the sense that the Chief Scientific Advisor is female, of course, Professor Julie Williams, and she will be a fantastic role model for young women who want to pursue science. When it comes to engineering, for example, I know that the ESW, the Engineering Education Scheme for Wales, have specifically targeted young women in terms of them seeing engineering as a skill and a job for them in the future, and they have had some success in encouraging young women, particularly into engineering subjects in universities.
We now move to questions from the party leaders, and first this afternoon, Leader of the Opposition, Andrew R.T. Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I noticed in your week up in Llandudno, one of the jewels of the Welsh tourist crown, if I might add, that you said to your party conference that we hold our hands up and say we could have done better when talking about waiting lists. 2 months ago, you said about PISA, about the Western European League table, obviously on educational attainment levels, we took our eye off the ball when you were responding to our appalling performance in those league tables. You also told your conference, for too long, the education system in this country has coasted. Do you not recognise that Labour have been in government for 15 years?
Well, I have to say to the Leader of the Opposition, I was there for a weekend, not for a week, just to correct him on that. And at least we went there and supported Llandudno, of course, unlike his own party, who didn't support the jewel in the crown of Welsh tourism. We take a very different view in that regard. But I have said many times, I think it's important to be open about the challenges that we face in Wales, and I did exactly that. But, of course, I also made reference to the fact that we have seen an unconscionable number of attacks on Wales from his party in London, and it is fair to say that we have seen the beginning of a Tory war on Wales.
As usual, the First Minister trying to detract from genuine scrutiny of his appalling and his party's appalling record here in Wales. Ultimately, you did accept that failure at your own conference last week, but it seems time and time again you failed to accept that responsibility here in the Chamber. But what was good to watch coming out of your conference last week was Ed Miliband acknowledging in his interview with the BBC that Anne Clwyd did have genuine concerns about the Welsh NHS. Do you now accept that her concerns should be taken seriously by your government?
I'm impressed that the Leader of the Opposition has spent so much of his weekend watching the Welsh Labour conference. I do hope that he picked up some tips and some sense, indeed, from the conference. But he asked the question about Anne Clwyd. Well, let me say this, that Anne's concerns have been taken seriously, and that's been evidenced by the fact that she has met the Health Minister more than one occasion. She has met me as well. She is perfectly entitled to have her concerns investigated. She is perfectly entitled to have her concerns aired publicly. But in order, of course, for the full picture to be known, the full report regarding her husband's care must be published, because I have been contacted by nurses who work at UHW who are concerned that they're not able to put their side of the story. And I think in order for there to be fair play for all round, including Anne, including her husband, including those who work there, that the full report is actually published.
I'm pleased to see your more measured response today, but ultimately your party last week blocked the ability for Anne Clwyd to become before the Health Committee here in the Assembly and present whatever evidence she had. Surely this institution is the place for that evidence to come so that members can scrutinise it. Or is it the case that the reason you admit failure at your party conference is your MPs and party members know about the failures that your government has inflicted on Wales here, whilst your members here are too ashamed to admit it? Why the Jekyll and Hyde, First Minister? Why the Jekyll and Hyde? A bit of honesty wouldn't go amiss.
Well, Anne was given a remit to look at the health service in England, and therefore it is in that direction that responsibility lies. But let's talk about honesty. Let's talk about the utter failure of the Conservative benches to stand up for Wales on electrification. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that the reason why, as we know on these benches, the reason why Conservative Central Office are briefing against Wales because they believe the Conservative benches here are too feeble to actually scrutinise here. That's why they're doing it. If I was in the leader of the opposition's position, I wouldn't be too happy to know that there are those in London who take the view that he is too inept to scrutinise here, and therefore they must do it for him. But I come back to the point about electrification. The Prime Minister said that the UK government was putting in the money to electrify the line to Swansea and to electrify the Valley lines. Of course, the Valley lines. If we're going to talk about failure, then we need to look no further than the abject failure on the Tory benches.
I think your question time is finished, Andrew Archie-Davies. We now move to Leader of Plaid Cymru, Liam Wood.
Diolch, Llywydd. Last week, the First Minister revealed a new way of sidestepping questions. He avoided answering by asking an apparent rhetorical question. Now, wouldn't it be good if the First Minister could end the term today, this week, by having the courage to face his responsibilities? In that spirit, Llywydd, perhaps the First Minister will, on this occasion, be prepared to give us a straight yes or no answer. Last week, he said that Anne Clwyd had produced no evidence or facts. This week, he appears to be rolling back on that. Does that mean that Anne Clwyd will now have the First Minister's blessing to give evidence to our Health Committee?
It's not for me to give my view on what the Health Committee should do. It's an independent committee. And I have to say that what I've said about Anne's position is no different from last week. I'd like to know, of course, whether the views of the nurses as well are to be taken into account. I believe that they should. I don't want to answer a question with a question, but I'd love to know her views on that.
Liam Wood.
No straight answer yet again this week. Perhaps we were hoping for a bit too much.
Alan Davis. I'm serious about order. It's the First Minister's answering questions, not you. Liam Wood.
So with the First Minister's flippancy on this question is embarrassing. When is he going to take responsibility? Welsh Government statistics last week showed that Glangwili Hospital has a mortality rate over 37% higher than should be expected. The same statistics showed that Neath Talbot Hospital rate was over 28% higher than would be expected. Can the First Minister tell us why the mortality rates in these two hospitals are so high, higher than expected?
Well, the Health Minister has given an answer on that last week. We do know, and the Telegraph indeed said it 3 days ago, that in England people aren't being counted. The figures are being fiddled. That's what the Telegraph said. And so, in terms of the comparison, that comparison cannot be made. Now, I have to say, as far as the Leader of Plaid Cymru is concerned, I say this to her. I think it is absolutely crucial when it comes to the situation regarding Anne and the treatment of her husband, that the full facts are made known. I think it's important that the nurses are able to put their side of the story, and there can be full transparency as far as she is concerned and the staff are concerned. I hope that she will be able to agree that that is the fairest way forward.
First Minister, your answer is absolutely astounding. These are your own figures. I'm not comparing to England or anyone else. Now, one of the crucial questions that came out of the mid-staff's situation is that figures like this should act as an alarm. Now, when an alarm sounds, there should at least be some sort of investigation. These mortality figures place Glangwili in the same bracket as mid-staffs. Given this, will he now send the Health Inspector at Wales into Glangwili and Neath Port Talbot this week to investigate and produce an explanation for these alarming statistics? Or is he going to bury his head in the sand and continue to deny that there's a problem?
I do deplore the attack on Glangwili and its staff, I must say. I do deplore that. I also think it's unbelievable that I have offered the Leader of Plaid Cymru the opportunity to support full transparency when it comes to the treatment of Anne's husband, and she has failed to do it. The nurses at UHW will note what she has said, as indeed will Anne, I'm sure. And so she cannot preach about transparency when she is not prepared to support it in all circumstances. As I said, the Health Minister, the Leader of Plaid Cymru, has had her opportunity. I know she doesn't like to deviate from the script. She's had her opportunity. But as far as Glangwili is concerned, the Health Minister has given his views with regard to mortality data. It is right to say that where there are issues, we deal with those issues. It is right to say that when there are issues of mortality data that need to be investigated, they will be investigated. The Health Minister has said that. So I do not understand the Leader of Plaid Cymru when she says that no answer has been given. There are many allegations that can be made against us by the opposition parties. I do not think that lack of transparency is one of them. And we have said many, many times, us as the Health Minister, that where there are problems, they will be dealt with. We will not seek endlessly to blame another country as she is doing and the Tories have done.
We now move to Leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
First Minister, could you tell the Assembly how much public subsidy was afforded to each passenger who used the North-South Air Link last year?
It's a considerable amount of subsidies, over £100 a year, that much is true, and it's important we make sure that more people use the service in the future.
First Minister, between 2010 and 2013, the subsidy for the Air Link has increased by nearly 40%. At the same time, the number of passengers using the service has slumped by almost half. When was the last time that your government carried out a cost-benefit analysis to ensure that there was value for public money that the Air Link was providing?
We always look at the services that we subsidise in order to see whether they provide value for money, and it's important, of course, that we do what we can to make it as easy as possible for people to travel north-south in our country, and that is something I believe that the North-South Air Link does.
Well, that's a very interesting definition of always, because the last time your government carried out such cost-benefit analysis was in 2008, and when passenger numbers were twice what they are now. Now, since 2011, nearly 100 bus routes have been axed across Wales because they needed public subsidy, sometimes as much as £2 or £3 per person. Could you explain to this chamber why you're willing to prioritise spending £184 per passenger on a service that carries less than 200 people a week, when up and down the country people are facing isolation, often in our most poor communities, because you're cutting the funding for bus services that are subsidised for £2 or £3?
Well, we believe that the subsidies that have been made available for the bus services operator grant are certainly subsidies that can be justified, and they are enough. We have free bus passes, which do not exist to the same extent in England. But what the Leader of the Lib Dems is saying is he wants to stop the North-South Air route, make redundant those who work at Ynysmôn Airport, and close down Ynysmôn Airport. Now, she should have the courage to say that, if that is indeed what she thinks. I do not think her party has the best record when it comes to transport. We all saw her own party slavishly support the Conservatives on electrification. And her own party leader said to me in London last week, of course, the main line does not run between Bridgend and Cardiff. That's the level of understanding that we have, not just in the Tories. We expect no favours in the Tories for Wales at all, of course, but absolutely no understanding of any transport issues on behalf of the Lib Dems either.
We now move back to questions on the paper. Question 4 is Mark Isherwood.
Will the First Minister outline Welsh Government support for dementia sufferers in Wales?
Dementia is a very distressing condition, not just for those, of course, who suffer it, but for those who live with it around them, trying to help them as they deal with their condition. I can say that Together for Mental Health confirms the importance of improved care, information and support for those with dementia. Action has been taken and will continue to be taken to drive up standards of care.
Thank you. Well, earlier this month, I chaired a session at the annual Reset Cymru, that's Research in Specialist and Elderly Care, and Neurodem Cymru, it's the Wales Dementias and Neurodegenerative Diseases Research Network Conference in Bangor. I know the First Minister's had dealings with both organisations himself in the past. I think you spoke at the conference yourself in 2009. Concern was highlighted in discussion over what's going to happen to the research network from 2015. Will you therefore ensure that early attention is given to that so that sustainable plans are in place well ahead of the current funding round coming to an end?
Well, these are issues that we must, of course, address very seriously in the future. We expect that the number of dementia sufferers will increase in years to come as the population gets older. And you will know that the Minister himself is supportive, particularly of the Dementia Friends scheme. He attended the launch of the scheme. He has been seen wearing his Dementia Friends badge in television interviews, and of course funding of £50,000 has been awarded to the campaign. And the campaign, of course, does reflect our philosophy that involving users and carers in every aspect of their treatment is fundamental to securing the most comfortable outcome for people when dealing with an illness that is so difficult for so many people.
Rebecca Evans.
Thank you. Ms Minister, it is possible to live well with dementia, but of course that relies on you living in the right place with the right support, and long-term stays in hospitals don't fit that bill. How is the Welsh Government ensuring that there are sufficient numbers of EMI nursing beds right across Wales to ensure that long extended stays in hospital aren't that people don't have to endure that, really, because it's not in their best interest?
Well, we would prefer people to live in the community with dementia rather than be confined to hospitals. For some people, of course, that isn't possible, but nevertheless, I think that's the best way. We know that with dementia, people are less confused when they're in an environment that they've been familiar with for some time. And it's important, of course, that where people are able to, that they can live at home in an environment that they are familiar with. That certainly helps them as individuals. As far as how we want to move forward with this, we've got the 1,000 Lives Plus methodology. Amongst the targets in that methodology are, for example, improvement of care of individuals in the general hospital setting and in inpatient units, reducing lengths of stay, and also, importantly, reducing the inappropriate use of antipsychotic medications in accordance with NICE guidelines. So it's getting the balance right. We know that historically in the health service there was for many years an emphasis on putting people in hospital for treatment. Now, of course, we live in an age where making sure that people are able to live in their homes and in their communities is more of a priority, and we must, of course, make sure we get the balance right.
Ellen Jones.
Prif Weinidog, mae yna ddiffyg gwasanaethau ar gyfer bobl ifancach sydd yn dioddau o dementia, bobl dan 60, a mae anghenion penodol iawn gyda'r grŵp yma o bobl. Awnewch chi fel Llywodraeth roi gwell mwy arweiniad i fyrddau iechyd ag awdurdodau lleol ynglyn â sut gallen nhw gydlynu gwasanaethau yn well i gwrdd â anghenion y grŵp penodol yma o bobl?
Pwysig dros ben, wrth gwrs, fi'n dod nôl i 1,000 Lives Plus a hefyd Intelligent Targets, sydd wedi dangos y ffordd ymlaen ynglyn â phawb sydd yn dioddau o dementia. Y dieddau yw, wrth gwrs, os mae rhywun cael dementia yn ifancach, dyn nhw ddim yn byw mor hir, fel reol. Mae rhywun sy'n cael dementia yn henach, mae'n teulu byw yn hirach, ac wrth gwrs mae lot fwy o waith gofod cael ei wneud mwyn sicrhau bod nhw'n cael gofal. So felly byddwn ni'n erfyn i bob bwrdd iechyd i ystyried anghenion rhywun â dementia beth bynnag yw ei oedran nhw.
Question 5, Mick Anthony.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister give an update on the First World War commemorations in Wales?
Well, the centenary commemoration in Wales is developing a full and varied programme under the leadership of Sir Dian Hopkin and his board, and full details are available on the Cymru'n Cofio Wales Remembers website.
Thank you for the answer, First Minister. In Llantrysant, in my constituency, for the last couple of years they've been carrying out research and have now, they think, identified just about everybody who has sacrificed their lives in one war or another, and they intend to establish their own commemoration monument which previously hasn't existed. Would you agree with me, Minister, that in these commemorations, engagement with younger generations, with schools, in education projects is important in terms of that generation understanding about war, but also understanding the importance of the democratic process and also the willingness to engage in Europe and internationally is the way in which we actually avoid wars in the future.
I think we must reflect on the fact that the idea of a war in Europe now is incredible to think of, but within living memory it was the norm. And the First World War was an example of what happens when things go wrong. It was, of course, a war where, I suppose, if you ask most people, they wouldn't be able to tell you how it started. And that, of course, is an issue, making sure that people understand the dynamics of what happened in order to avoid that happening in the future. But the point I've made when I've spoken at events is to ask young people what it would feel like for them as teenagers to be taken halfway across the world, because France and Belgium in those days were a long way in terms of time to get there than they are now. To have to be in a trench, I've asked those what it would be like to stay at home and worry about those that had gone away, and that gives them some idea what it must have been like. For us, it's impossible to understand it firsthand. We've never had that experience. But what is important is that young people, indeed all people, understand that as a result of the experience of the First World War, we look to make sure that such an event never happens again.
David Ellis Thomas.
Diolch yn fawr, Vanessa Glywydd. Mae'r Prif Weinidog felly o ystyried I sylwadau yn cytuno, dwi'n sicr, mae dyletswydd cofio fel hyn i'w canolbwyntio ar y 35 o filoedd a gollwyd o Gymru yn y cyfnod yna. A'r pwysigrwydd hefyd o addysgu prosesau heddwch fel rhan o'n cwricwlwm ni, yn ogystal â dysgu hanes rhyfeloedd.
Ac I gofio hefyd, mae rhaid dweud wrth gwrs ynglyn â'r cyrff sydd yn cynrychioli rhywna sydd wedi bod yn y lluoedd arfau. Dyn nhw ddim yn gweld unrhyw fath o ddathliad o'r rhyfel cyntaf. Maen nhw moyn sicrhau bod bobl yn deall beth oedd profiad milwyr, profiad rhywna oedd ar y môr, profiad rhywna enghraifft oedd yn hedfan mewn awyrennau ar y pryd oedd yn rhoi rhywbeth fel hanner awr o fywyd nhw, o'n y môr ysgafn. Ac I feddwl am beth ddigwyddodd I rhywna oedd ddim wedi mynd, yn wedi oedd yn pryderu am tilwth oedd yn Ffrainc a Gwlad Belg, a hefyd dros y byd I gyd. A beth hoffen ni I weld bod ni'n ystyried beth oedd wedi digwydd, ystyried beth oedd yr effaith ar gymdeithas ar ôl y rhyfel cyntaf, ond nid gweld bod yna rhywbeth I ddathlu. Gallwch ddim dathlu wrth gwrs colledion fel hyn ynglyn â'r nifer o bobl ifanc gath I lladd.
Mike Edges.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, with the memorial nearing completion, the Welsh Memorial in Flanders campaign have organised a service of dedication in Flanders on Saturday the 16th of August to pay tribute to those Welsh soldiers that fought and died in the First World War. Should your diary allow, will you attend that service?
I can confirm to the member that I will be at that service.
Question 6, Alan Fred Jones.
Wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am weithrediad uned Gymraeg y Llywodraeth.
Ond mae Sadran y Gymraeg yn gyfrifol am weithredu strategaeth y Gymraeg iaith byw a'r strategaeth addysg cyfrwng Cymraeg.
Diolch yn fawr. Y pwrpas dod â uned strategaeth yr iaith Gymraeg I mewn I Lywodraeth oedd rhoi grym y Llywodraeth y tu ôl i'r gweithredu. Ers 3 blynedd, does dim byd ond distawrwydd llethol wedi dod o'r uned. Ydych chi'n bwriadu cynnal yr uned yma a sicrhau ei bod yn cyflawni yn weithredol?
Dwi'n gwybod yn wir o gwbl yn beth yw barn, nid felly yw barn rhai eraill ym Mhlaid Cymru. Fi'n credu bod gyda ni gynhadledd fawr, bod gyda ni'r gwaith sydd wedi cael ei wneud ynglyn â iaith economi, y gwaith sydd wedi cael ei wneud ynglyn â ystyried fel I gynnal cymunedau Cymraeg, gwaith Rodri Llwyd Morgan, wrth gwrs, a bydd yna ddatganiad cyfun yn cael ei roi i'r cynulliad cyn diwedd y tymor nesaf.
Susie Davis.
Diolch Llywydd. Wel, fel y wedwch Prif Weinidog, mae'r uned yn gyfrifol am gyflawni canlyniadau am llanelli yn y strategaeth iaith Gymraeg. Un o nodau allweddol y strategaeth yw cynyddu defnydd Gymraeg yn y gweithle. Sut bydd toriadau diweddar I gyllideb addysg I oedolion yn effeithio ar yr uned a'r gwaith hwnnw?
Wel, ni'n gweithio wrth gwrs gyda pob menter iaith er mwyn sicrhau, gyda'r mentrau iaith er mwyn sicrhau bod nhw'n gweithio yn y ffordd mwy effeithiol sy'n bosib, a ni mwyn sicrhau bod yna rôl iddyn nhw ynglyn â hybu'r Gymraeg yn y gweithle, enghraifft. Ond mae'n rhaid wneud wrth gwrs, y reswm pan ni mewn y sefyllfa ariannol hyn, yw achos y toriau sydd wedi dod o'ch plaid chi yn Llundain.
Question 7, Ali Roberts.
Diolch Llywydd. A wnaeth y Prynidog roi wybodaeth ddiweddaraf am yr adolygiad o wasanaethau newydd enedigol yng Ngogledd Cymru.
Mae'r panel annibynnol wedi cyflwyno i adroddiad. Wy'n cyfarfod â'r panel ar y trydydd, sef dydd Iau, mwyn i fi, wrth gwrs, i gael i argymhellion nhw i gyflwyno i fi, a wedyn, wrth gwrs, bydd y penderfyniad yn cael i wneud. Bydd unrhyw datganiad yn dod, wrth gwrs, ar ôl y pasg pan bydd y cynulliad, wrth gwrs, nôl yn eistedd.
Diolch am y wybodaeth hynny. Ga hefyd groesawu'r ffaith bod y panel adolygu wedi ymwneud â grwpiau yn y gogledd a hefyd efo aelodau cynulliad. Ond ga i ofyn i chi, mae hyn yn rhywbeth bell gyrhaeddol o ran gwasanaeth yn y gogledd, a fysych chi'n ystyried cael trafodaeth o fewn y cynulliad yn hytrach na datganiad byddai hynny'n ysgrifenedig neu ar lafar?
Na, penderfyniad yw hwn. Penderfyniad gweinidog yw hwn, felly datganiad yw'r ffordd ymlaen. Datganiad, wrth gwrs, sy'n agored, a wrth gwrs fi'n deall bydd yna sgrwtiniaid o'r datganiad hynny. Ond mae, wrth gwrs, yr adroddiad hyn yn bell gyrhaeddol, fi'n deall hynny, yna dyna pham, wrth gwrs, fi'n moyn ystyried yn fanwl iawn dros yr wythnosau nesaf.
Jonathan Saunders.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm sorry to take issue with the comments that Aled Roberts has just made, but as regards the panel and the engagement programme, I have to say that certainly in Aberconway there's been very little engagement with relevant stakeholders and myself as an Assembly member. We're now in April. You mentioned in January that this panel would undertake an engagement programme with all relevant stakeholders. Why is that the case, that we've been excluded completely from this process?
Well, I mean, that's not what other members are saying to me, I must say, but I can say the panel has been led by Sonia Mills, who has a breadth of experience in the NHS, including delivery on key service changes, and expert clinical advice has been provided by the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. So I do not think that attacking the panel itself is the correct way forward.
Question 8, Anne Jones.
Thank you. What assessment has the First Minister made of the impact of the cost of living on families in Wales?
The cost of living, of course, is determined mainly by UK government policies, but we closely monitor the position in Wales. We are doing everything possible, of course, to get more people into employment, and we see, of course, the unemployment statistics where we lead the UK, because we believe this is the best way of ensuring family budgets can cope under the increasing pressure they find themselves in.
Thank you, First Minister. Last year, over 29,000 people in Wales visited a Trussell Trust food bank. That indicates to me that they are struggling to feed themselves and their families as they fight the ever-increasing cost of Cameron on his society, or in fact the cost of living. Now, the Vale of Glamorgan MP Alan Cairns suggests that these people who visit these food banks are either drug addicts, pay too much for their Sky TV, or in his opinion simply are too stupid to manage their own money. And if we add to that the crass statement from the Crawley councillor just recently that says that food poverty is a nonsense because they find it difficult to get into a restaurant on a weekend evening, that proves to me that many in my constituency who are having to use food banks will find those statements most distressing, as I do. First Minister, will you make sure that your government continues to keep as a priority those people for whom the cost of living rises caused by the UK government are causing them huge problems, and that we will continue to stand up for them?
Well, I find those comments incredible, I have to say. But I think we do underestimate sometimes on these benches how much of a bubble that Conservatives live in terms of not understanding what's going on in the world, not understanding the true effect on so many working families and those who don't work, not understanding the effect of the bedroom tax, where I have constituents, for example, who look after adult-age disabled children who are being caught by the benefit tax. It doesn't matter, of course, to them in the slightest way. The fact that there are people who are working hard, who are being hammered. We see, for example, in England now, this idea of a council tax freeze doesn't apply to the lowest paid, because they will see a £120 increase in their council tax. So the council tax freeze was always a nonsense from start to finish, targeting, of course, those who are most, of course, at risk. But I mean, I think there are, I have to give Alan Cairns some credit. I'm going to say there are some people who are too stupid to manage their own money. And we see that in the UK government, who've just sold off Royal Mail back to the people who originally owned it at a knockdown price. The biggest scandal since the last time they did it with the railways.
Mohammed Ashkan.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Further to Anne's question, I would say this. Since 2010, 155,000 of the lowest paid workers in Wales have taken out of tax altogether, thanks to the policy of United Kingdom government in London. Will you confirm, First Minister, in this chamber that this will be taken into account in any assessment you make of the impact of cost of living on families in Wales?
They're pinching your policy. They're pinching your policy. It's a Conservative policy. Now, it was a Lib Dem policy as far as I was aware. But there we are. Why not take the credit for the Lib Dems' own policies? Well, I mean, I find what the member has said is factually correct. But what he fails to mention is the fact that people's living standards have gone backwards in the past 4 years. He fails to mention the fact that the economy is recovering up till 2010, till his party got hold of it and took it backwards again. He fails to mention the fact that his own party leader in 2008 wanted the banks to be left to stew, didn't want them bailed out, thought they should fail, thought people should see their savings lost, and now he's trying to say that this has nothing to do with them, that this is something that is all the fault of a previous party. The reality is they have failed to protect the lowest paid workers, failed on the bedroom tax, failed on making sure that the lowest paid people are protected, failed on the council tax where there is no freeze for those who are the lowest paid. And it contrasts with what we do here in Wales, where we take tackling poverty seriously and we do not decry those people who are in a position where they need food banks. I find it deplorable that those people who are at the bottom of society economically are still being hammered and abused by Tories.
Rheinald Iorwerth.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Llywydd. Mae cynnydd mewn y biliau ynni wrth gwrs wedi ychwanegu at y wasgfa ar gosta byw. Dwi yn croesawu'r ymchwiliad i'r 6 cwmni ynni mawr. Mi fydda cwmni ynni, mae'n dwylo cyhoeddus, nid am ddifyd, ond wrth gwrs yn gallu ailfuddsoddi elw ar yr ynni hun mewn una, dod â biliau lawr neu ailfuddsoddi mewn seilwaith. Ydy'r Prif Weinidog yn cytuno y galla'r math yna o gam yn torri ar fynopoli y 6 cwmni mawr fod yn ateb cynaladwy ar gyfer y broblem yma yng Nghymru?
O'i gryfod bwysig dros ben bod popeth yn cael ei wneud i ystyried sefyllfa ni ar farchnad ynni. Wy'n credu beth byddai'r aelod yn gweud, ydy'n ni cael rhywbeth o gwmni sy'n cael ei redeg gan Llywodraeth Cymru mwyn wneud hwnna. Dwi'n credu bydd hwnna'n broblem ynglyn â chymorth state aids o achos y ffaith byddai rhaid dongos bod hwnna ddim yn rhywbeth sy'n ymyrryd yn y farchnad mewn ffordd sydd ddim yn deg yn gystadleuol. Ond fy marn i'n bwysig dros ben bod ni'n sicrhau sefyllfa yn gyntaf bod prisiau ynni yn glir i bobl, dwi'n credu bod yna'n wir ar hyn o bryd, a hefyd wrth gwrs i sicrhau bod bobl yn deall ym mha ffordd allan nhw i weld y deal gorau i nhw. Unwaith to, dwi'n gweld hwnna'n digwydd. Dwi'n croesawu'r ffaith wrth gwrs bod Llywodraeth y Daearn Unedig wedi cymryd polisi y blaid lafur mwyn sicrhau bod hwnna'n digwydd.
Question 9, Roger Dillon Thomas.
Pa drafodaethau mae Prif Weinidog wedi cael gyda Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig ynghylch a gadleoli Trident i Gymru?
Dim.
Wel, mae hynny'n ddiddorol iawn o ystyried mae'r Prif Weinidog hi'n gododd y mater yma rhyw flwyddyn nôl, lle roedd e'n awyddus iawn i groesawu yn ei eiriau fe Trident i Gymru. Pe tai na bleidlais o blaid annibyniaeth yn yr Alban ar y 19 o Fedi, ac fod Llywodraeth yr Alban yn gwireddu i addewid i symud Trident o'r Alban, a fyddech chi yn ailgodi y sgwrs hynny gyda Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig, ac a fyddech chi yn rhoi y cyfle i bobl Cymru fynegu barn trwy referendum ar hynny beth chi yn penderfynu croesawu Trident i Gymru?
Wel, dwi ddim wedi codi'r peth yn y tro cyntaf, so allai ddim ailgodi fe, ateb yw na, byddwn ni ddim yn codi fe.
And George Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, the Trident nuclear deterrence has been the very thing it was set out to be, a deterrence and guarantee the security of the United Kingdom. There are discussions going on at a Westminster level to renew the deterrent, but obviously there's considerable upgrading of the current fleet. What actions does your government take to engage with the Ministry of Defence and departments in London to promote Welsh businesses and what they might be able to do in securing contracts, either with the renewal of the deterrent or obviously the upgrading that is proposed by other parties?
Well, the defence industry is an important part of the Welsh economy. We know that. They employ thousands of people, and we always work to encourage them to see the opportunities that arise when they arise. And that is true of defence as it is of any other sector.
Question 10, Julie James.
Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on cross-border arrangements for health services?
Yes, a cross-border protocol is in place to ensure relevant patients have access to appropriate services and all associated matters are handled in an agreed, consistent manner.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. In the light of the unprecedented problems and scandals in the English NHS, it seems to me that Jeremy Hunt and the Tory and Liberal Democrats who run the government should endeavour to concentrate on those problems instead of pointing the finger at here us in Wales with our war on Wales. First Minister, a recent claim is that it's unprecedented that 10% of Welsh patients use English A&E departments. First Minister, could you update this chamber as to how many English patients use Welsh A&E departments?
In 2013 to 14, 30,325 English patients attended Welsh A&E departments. 20,758 English patients are registered in Wales. We seek to put no barrier to them in terms of getting their treatment in Wales.
Nick Ramsey.
How do you follow that? First Minister, in the light of the continuing funding crisis in the Welsh NHS, Silk 2 makes a number of recommendations, common sense recommendations, relating to cross-border healthcare. Patients should receive treatment where it is most clinically appropriate, and both the English and Welsh health services must work more closely together to deliver specialised services. The Welsh Government has not always got this right in the past. Will you now act to ensure that the border is no longer a barrier to accessing health services?
Well, I don't accept the Welsh Government's got it wrong. What about the UK Government? The reality is that people will cross the border both ways for treatment. There are many people who come for cancer treatment in Wrexham from England. There are people, as I said, registered with GPs in Wales from England. There are many thousands of people who attend Welsh A&Es from England. The reality is that many Welsh people will go the other way, particularly for very specialised treatment, and that is something that we welcome because it is part of what knits us together as part of the UK. We have, of course, the Welsh NHS, but it doesn't mean that it should be entirely self-contained. I would have thought the member would welcome the fact that there is close working between the English NHS and the Welsh NHS in order to deliver services for both Wales and England.
Ellen Jones.
Prif Weinidog, mae'ch llywodraeth chi nawr yn gorfod prynu gwasanaethau cardiac ar gyfer cleifion De Cymru o'r sector breifat yn Lloegr. Allwch chi amlinellu ni felly pa gamau chi'n cymryd i adeiladu lan capacity cardiac yn Rheforys ac yn yr Hyth, ac o fewn 19 mis, ydych chi'n hyderus y bydd y capacity hynna'n ddigonol i gwrdd â cleifion, anghenion cleifion Cymru yn Ne Cymru, neu ydyn ni yn mynd i orfod dibynnu ar y gwasanaeth breifat yn Lloegr yn hirach na hynny?
Rydyn nod sicrhau bod mwy o capacity ar gael yn Ne Cymru, ond wrth gwrs, lle mae bobl yn gorfod cael triniaeth, beth sy'n bwysig yw sicrhau bod nhw'n cael y triniaeth hynny a nid dadle ynglyn â ble dilyn nhw i fynd. Wrth gweud na, mae'n bwysig dros ben i sicrhau, fel mae'r Gweinidog Iechyd wedi gweud bod ni yn adeiladu'r capacity yma yng Nghymru, a dyna gwmwys beth ni moyn wneud.
Kirsty Williams.
First Minister, many of my constituents receive cancer and oncology services across the border as it's their nearest centre. One such constituent, Mr Christopher Bamford, attended my surgery on Friday. He lives in Llandrindod, Wells, and he is suffering from metastatic bowel cancer. His oncologist, based at Hereford Hospital, wants to prescribe him Avastin, something that he can prescribe to his English patients. Mr Bamford, because he's Welsh, cannot get Avastin, yet he sits next to people in the waiting room who can. What advice could you give Mr Bamford?
I don't think that's entirely correct, but I think it's important with something like this that it is looked at very carefully. If I could ask the member to provide the details to the Health Minister, we will of course investigate his case as somebody who's a Welsh resident.
Question 11, Jenny Rathbone.
First Minister, what is the timeline for developing a new map of public service delivery for local government?
We'll be setting out the Welsh Government's position before the summer, but I have said on many occasions it's important that the map is agreed before the summer in order for those authorities who wish to merge sooner rather than later, and they are there, are able to do so without the fear of being unpicked further on down the line.
Excellent. The Cardiff capital region is obviously absolutely a crucial part of the landscape in helping to distribute the wealth of our capital city that was built on the wealth of the valleys to generate more jobs and improve our industries. Now, Williams has said that it would be a shame if the city region initiatives were to increase the overall complexity or weaken the governance of local government, and I wondered what account will be paid for that in developing your new map.
Well, the city regions, of course, would remain in place. I mean, one thing I need to make absolutely clear is that as we move towards local government mergers, that doesn't mean an end to collaboration. It can't. And the reality is that if you look at the economic region of Cardiff, it's far, far bigger, and always will be far, far bigger than the political boundaries of the city. And so it will be important in the future that all those local authorities that are part of the Cardiff economic region, or indeed Swansea or the other parts of Wales, work together and recognise that. We know full well that many thousands of people commute into Cardiff Central Railway Station every single day. They will come from all over the valleys, and they will have their own local authorities, and it'll continue that way beyond any merger in any event. But in order for them to have the most effective service when it comes to developing the city region economically, all those local authorities will still need to collaborate regardless of what they look like.
Jonathan Saunders.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, when the Williams Commission was published, such was the negative response by many councillors and authority leaders across Wales, stating simply that they would not merge with the neighbouring authority as was proposed in the report. And many have actually met formally and resolved not to do this. Of course, you yourself said that you would have a position once you had spoken to your own party members. Have you done this? And also, how do you intend to move forward with local authorities that simply refuse to merge? Will you force these mergers?
Well, I mean, I was most impressed by her party leader and his knowledge of my party's conference. What she seems not to have noticed is that we did exactly that at our conference and got the agreement of both our wider party and local authority leaders to the principle of mergers. And I will, of course, give my support to all that can be done in order to improve services. We cannot carry on with a situation where we have a structure where one local authority then could collapse so completely. It has to be taken over by government in Cardiff, and we cannot tolerate a situation where 6 local authorities are in special measures in education.
Bethan Jenkins.
Prif Weinidog, yn rhan o'r system mapio yma, fyddech chi'n edrych ar y gwasanaethau sydd wedi cael eu allanoli neu preifateiddio yn barod gan nifer o awdurdodau lleol. A dyn ni'n deall bod yna lot o'r cwmnïau yma wedi rhoi prisiau lan ar gyfer rhai o'i gwasanaethau ers iddyn nhw gael eu allanoli. A fyddech chi felly yn edrych mewn i hyn i sicrhau bod y gwasanaethau hynny yn gynaladwy'r dyfodol.
Wel, mae'n mwyn am bwysig dros ben, wrth gwrs. Mae'n rhaid i bob awdurdod lleol i sicrhau pa ffordd maen nhw'n symud ymlaen gyda gwasanaethau. Un o'r pethau sydd wedi cael ei godi dy fi yw, os mae 'na 2 awdurdod yn uno, a bod un wedi allanu gwasanaethau, un ddim wedi, beth felly bydd y sefyllfa? Bydd rhaid wrth gwrs i gael sefyllfa lle mae un yn redeg gyda'r llall, a nid bod popeth yn cael ei roi allan a popeth yn dod nôl mewn to. Bydd hwnna'n ffili digwydd ar y dechrau ta beth. I also need to I don't normally do this, but I have to do it. Jonathan Saunders did say who runs education. It is the local authorities. One of the local authorities in special measures is the only authority run by the Tories in Wales, namely Mundershire.
After First Minister, when Paul Williams gave evidence to the Local Government and Communities Committee last week, he was very keen to stress the recommendations in his report in terms of changing the culture of local authorities in terms of delivery of services. We've talked a lot about merger here, but what is the government doing to take forward those particular recommendations in terms of delivery of services?
I could not agree more. It's right to say that most of the debate around Williams has been on mergers. They're an important part of Williams, but it's about more than that. One of the most striking pieces of evidence that Williams found was that there are many public authorities who see the audit and scrutiny as an imposition, even an impertinence, and that has to change. There's no question about that. So simply merging authorities on their own won't do that. It has to go hand in hand with ensuring that there are cultural changes. There have been discussions, of course, with the parties in terms of what happens next. I think it's right to say that it will be impossible to present a bill to the Assembly, or a substantial bill to the Assembly before the election in 2016. That wouldn't work. But I am hopeful, of course, that there can be an emerging consensus in terms of moving forward, at least with that part of the report.
Thank you, First Minister.